The Discover. Dr. Sarah Chen never intended to create a weapon. Her work at the International Space Defense Coalition focused on protecting satellites from solar storms, a crucial but decidedly peaceful endeavor. The breakthrough came during a routine test of her new debris-clearing satellite network, designated Starsweeper. The holographic display in her Sydney laboratory showed something impossible. The test satellites, meant to generate minor electromagnetic pulses to deflect space debris, had created a localized disturbance in the solar wind patterns. Not just detected, created. Run it again, she ordered her AI assistant, ARA. The simulation played out exactly the same way. The synchronized pulses from multiple satellites formed a pattern that somehow influenced the very fabric of space weather. Sarah pushed away from her desk, her mind racing with implications. 3 years of work on satellite shielding had accidentally led to something far more significant. She reached for her comm unit, then hesitated. The military applications were obvious, too obvious. Before she could decide what to do, her laboratory door chimed. Dr. Chen. Director James Wong entered, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of stress. We need to talk. Privately. Sarah nodded, clearing her screens with a gesture. What's wrong, James? He activated a privacy field before speaking. Our deep space arrays detected something. Multiple objects, massive ones, decelerating at the edge of the solar system. They'll reach Jupiter's orbit in less than a month. Sarah felt her stomach drop. First contact. We think so. And based on their energy signatures, they're far beyond our technology level. He paused, studying her carefully. Which is why I'm here. Your last report mentioned anomalous results with the Starsweeper tests. Tell me everything. Sarah hesitated only briefly before pulling up her data. As she explained her accidental discovery, she watched James's expression shift from concern to cautious hope. The ability to influence space weather patterns could change everything, if they had time to develop it. How quickly can you scale this up? He asked when she finished. The basic principle is solid, but we'd need hundreds more satellites, maybe thousands, to create significant effects. And the control systems would need to be completely redesigned. She ran quick calculations in her head. 3 months, minimum. Probably closer to 6 for a reliable system. We have 4 weeks before they arrive. James's voice was grim. And we have no idea if they're friendly. Sarah looked at the simulation still running on her screen. The tiny disturbance in the solar wind pattern seemed insignificant now, but it represented something unprecedented. Humanity's first real step toward controlling the very environment of space itself. Give me everything I need, she said finally. People, resources, manufacturing capacity. We can't build a full system in 4 weeks, but we might be able to create something useful. James nodded. You'll have it. But Sarah. He paused at the door. Keep thinking defensive applications only. For now. The next 4 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sarah's laboratory expanded to occupy an entire floor of the ISDC complex. Teams worked around the clock, modifying existing satellites and rushing new ones into production. The Starsweeper project, originally planned as a network of 20 satellites, grew to include over 200 units. Sarah barely slept, splitting her time between improving the control systems and training operators to understand space weather patterns. The work was exhausting but exhilarating. They were creating something entirely new, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and capability. 2 days before the projected arrival of the alien vessels, Sarah stood in the ISDC's main control center, watching the latest test of their hurriedly assembled network. The satellites, now positioned throughout the inner solar system, pulsed with synchronized energy. On the main display, artificial auroras bloomed in space, creating patterns that could theoretically deflect or channel solar wind. It's beautiful, commented Dr. Yuki Tanaka, her chief assistant. But will it be enough? Sarah wished she had an answer. Their system could create localized disturbances in space weather patterns, possibly even enough to disrupt sensitive equipment. But without knowing anything about alien technology, they had no way to judge its effectiveness. The answer came sooner than expected. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and the main screen shifted to show a massive vessel emerging from faster-than-light travel near Mars. It dwarfed everything humanity had ever built in space, its sleek hull gleaming with unknown energy patterns. First contact, someone whispered in the suddenly silent control room. More ships appeared, taking up positions throughout the solar system. Their deployment was precise, professional, and unmistakably military in nature. Humanity's first meeting with alien life would not be a peaceful cultural exchange. Dr. Chen, James's voice came over the comm. The Security Council is meeting in 5 minutes. They need to know exactly what our options are. Sarah studied the tactical display, watching as more alien ships arrived. Her accidental discovery might be humanity's only advantage in what was coming. The question was, would it be enough? She squared her shoulders and headed for the council chamber. The next few hours would determine whether her work would help preserve humanity's independence or become a footnote in someone else's history of conquest. The Starsweeper satellites continued their silent orbit, their potential still untested against an adversary that had mastered the stars. But they represented something uniquely human, the ability to turn an accident into innovation, to find unexpected solutions to impossible problems. The time had come to show the galaxy what humanity could do. First contact. The Valkyrian ships hung in space like polished obsidian, their massive forms reflecting distant starlight. Sarah watched from the ISDC command center as the alien fleet maintained their precise formation around Mars. After 12 hours of silence, a transmission finally arrived. The alien commander appeared on the main screen, humanoid but clearly not human. Silver-scaled skin and multifaceted eyes marked them as something evolved under a different sun. When they spoke, the translation I struggled to keep up. We are the Valkyrian Empire. Your system lies within our expansion zone. Submit to integration or face immediate military response. The Security Council's reply was diplomatic but firm. Earth would maintain its independence. The alien commander's expression didn't change, but their next words carried unmistakable menace. You have 6 hours to reconsider. Study our capabilities in the meantime. The transmission cut off. Moments later, a Valkyrian destroyer approached a derelict Earth satellite near Mars. A pulse of energy reached out, and the satellite simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but apparently erased from space-time itself. That's their idea of a demonstration, James muttered. Sarah, please tell me you have something. She did, but it was desperate. The Starsweeper network was untested against alien technology, and their hasty modifications might not work at all. But as she watched the tactical display showing the overwhelming Valkyrian force, she knew they had to try. We can create a localized solar storm, she explained, bringing up the control interface. If their technology is as energy-intensive as it appears, a sudden surge in space weather might disrupt their systems, at least temporarily. James studied the display. How close do the satellites need to be? That's the problem. We need at least 20 units working in sync, and they need to be within 10,000 kilometers of the target. She paused, which means we have to let them get very close to Earth. The next 6 hours were a blur of preparations. Sarah's team positioned the Starsweeper satellites in a new configuration, hiding them among the debris of Earth's orbital infrastructure. They only had enough units to create one major weather event. Everything would depend on timing and placement. When the deadline expired, the Valkyrian response was immediate. Their fleet began moving toward Earth, energy weapons charging. But something about their formation caught Sarah's attention. They're clustering their ships, she realized. Their weapons must require significant power synchronization. A plan formed in her mind. If we time this right. The Valkyrian fleet approached Earth's orbit, their formation tightening as they prepared to fire. Sarah waited until the lead ships crossed her calculated threshold, then activated the Starsweeper network. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the space around the Valkyrian fleet began to shimmer. Solar wind patterns twisted and intensified, forming an artificial storm more powerful than anything they'd created in testing. The effect on the alien ships was immediate and dramatic. Their energy weapons flickered and died as the storm disrupted their power systems. Several smaller vessels spun out of formation, their navigation systems scrambled by the electromagnetic chaos. "It's working," Yuki exclaimed. "Their shields are failing." But the Valkyrians weren't defeated. The alien commander's voice crackled through the disrupted communications. Impressive, but insufficient. Their flagship's engines flared with impossible power, pushing through the artificial storm. Other ships followed, their technology adapting to the disruption. Sarah watched in dismay as her greatest achievement proved to be only a temporary obstacle. Then James grabbed her arm. "Look at their power readings." The aliens had pushed through the storm, but at a cost. Their energy reserves were depleted, their weapons operating at minimal power. More importantly, their tight formation had been broken, leaving them vulnerable to conventional weapons. "All defense platforms, open fire," James ordered. "Concentrate on their weakened ships." Earth's orbital defense grid came to life, missiles and energy weapons striking the scattered Valkyrian fleet. 2 alien destroyers exploded in silent fireballs. A third, its systems crippled by the storm, drifted helplessly as Earth fighters moved in to disable it. The alien commander's next transmission showed genuine surprise. "You created that storm artificially. Impossible. Our sensors detected no technology capable of such manipulation. Perhaps you should review your assessment of Earth's capabilities." James replied calmly. "We're willing to demonstrate further if necessary." The Valkyrian fleet retreated, gathering their damaged ships and withdrawing to Mars orbit. Their commander's final message was brief. "We will return, with countermeasures." In the aftermath, Sarah stood at her laboratory window, watching Earth shine below. They had survived first contact, but at a cost. The Valkyrians would be back, and next time they would be prepared for the Starsweeper technology. "We need to think bigger," she told James when he visited her lab that evening. "The current network can create localized storms, but what if we could control space weather on a system-wide scale?" He raised an eyebrow. "Is that possible?" Sarah pulled up new designs on her holographic display. "With enough satellites and the right positioning, we could theoretically create permanent weather patterns throughout the solar system. Safe corridors for our ships, hazard zones for enemies." "How many satellites?" "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands." She met his gaze. "And we need to do it before they return." James nodded slowly. "I'll make the calls. The Security Council will approve any resource you need." He paused at the door. The Valkyrians thought they could simply demand our surrender. Instead, they'd given us a reason to push human innovation further than ever before. Sarah turned back to her designs. The Starsweeper network had proven that humanity could stand up to advanced alien technology. Now they needed to prove they could win. The race was on to transform the very nature of space warfare, one artificial storm at a time. Project Aurora. The massive manufacturing facility on the moon's far side hummed with activity. 3 months after the first Valkyrian encounter, humanity's greatest engineering project was in full swing. Sarah watched through reinforced windows as robotic assemblers constructed Starsweeper satellites at an unprecedented rate. "Production Line 7 is now operational," Yuki reported, checking her tablet. "That brings us to full capacity. We're producing 100 units per day." Sarah nodded, her attention on the testing chamber where the latest satellite prototype underwent stress trials. The new design was smaller, more efficient, and far more powerful than the original Starsweepers. Each unit could generate twice the energy output while requiring half the resources to build. "How many deployed so far?" she asked. 3,000 functional units in orbit around Earth, Mars, and Venus. Another 1,000 in strategic positions throughout the inner system. Yuki paused. The outer system network is at 30% completion. It was progress, but not fast enough. Their deep space sensors had detected Valkyrian fleet movements, suggesting they were gathering forces for a major assault. The question wasn't if they would return, but when. James arrived as they were reviewing the latest simulation data. "The Security Council approved your Jupiter proposal," he announced. "They're diverting 3 more manufacturing platforms to lunar orbit." Sarah's Jupiter proposal was her most ambitious yet. By placing a dense network of star sweepers near the gas giant, they could use its massive magnetic field to amplify their effects. Theoretical models suggested they could create space weather patterns powerful enough to affect ships in faster-than-light transit. "That will help," she said, "but we need more than just numbers. The Valkyrians will have countermeasures for everything they saw in the first battle. We need something new." As if in response to her words, an alert flashed on the main screen. A small Valkyrian scout ship had been detected near Neptune, observing human activity. Before anyone could react, it vanished back into FTL travel. "They're testing our response times," James noted grimly, "and probably trying to figure out how our weather control works." Sarah had anticipated this. The original Starsweeper design had been deliberately simple, using obvious energy signatures that the Valkyrians could detect and analyze. But the new satellites incorporated stealth technology and could mask their emissions as natural phenomena. "Let them look," she said. "They're studying our first-generation technology, while we're building something far more sophisticated." The sophistication wasn't just in the hardware. Sarah's team had made breakthrough after breakthrough in understanding space weather patterns. They could now predict solar wind variations with unprecedented accuracy and had begun experimenting with creating permanent weather structures in space. "Show him the Aurora project," Yuki suggested. Sarah activated the main holographic display, bringing up a complex 3-dimensional model of the solar system. Colored lines showed natural space weather patterns flowing between the planets, but overlaid on these were new patterns, artificial currents and eddies in the solar wind that they had created and maintained. "We're not just making storms anymore," she explained. "We're reshaping the weather patterns of the entire solar system, creating permanent safe zones for our ships, hazard areas that will trap any hostile fleet, even corridors that can accelerate or slow down spacecraft." James studied the display with growing amazement. "You're building a fortress out of weather." "More than that," Sarah corrected. "We're learning to control the fundamental forces that shape space itself. The Valkyrians think they're facing a primitive species that got lucky with one defensive technology. They don't understand that they've pushed us to evolve faster than we ever have before." Their conversation was interrupted by a priority alert. Long-range sensors had detected a massive energy surge at the edge of the solar system. The Valkyrian main fleet had arrived. Over 300 ships, including several vessels larger than anything seen in the first battle. "Time to arrival," James asked tersely. "At their current speed, 72 hours to Jupiter orbit." The tactical officer's voice was steady despite the news. Sarah looked at the construction base where new satellites were taking shape. They had planned for more time, but they would have to make do with what they had. "Begin implementing Aurora Protocol," she ordered. "All satellites to designated positions. Activate the Jupiter Amplification Network." As alerts sounded throughout the facility, she turned to James. "We're about to find out if humanity's greatest innovation is enough to stop an empire." The next 3 days were a frenzy of final preparations. Sarah's team worked around the clock, fine-tuning the weather control systems and running combat simulations. The Starsweeper network, now over 5,000 units strong, moved into elaborate formations throughout the solar system. They had one significant advantage. The Valkyrians didn't know about the Jupiter Amplification Network. The massive array of satellites hidden in the gas giant's radiation belts could multiply their weather control effects exponentially. But it would only work once. After that, the enemy would adapt. "All stations report ready," Yuki announced as the deadline approached. Weather patterns are stable and responsive. Sarah took her position at the main control interface. The holographic display showed the Valkyrian fleet approaching Jupiter, their formation suggesting they expected resistance. But nothing in their behavior indicated they understood the true scale of what humanity had built. "They think we've just made more satellites like the ones they faced before," she observed. "They have no idea we've changed the rules of space combat itself." The first Valkyrian ships entered Jupiter's orbit, their sensors probing for Earth's defenses. Sarah watched them approach the trap, her hand hovering over the activation control. Everything they had learned, everything they had built, had led to this moment. It was time to show the galaxy that humanity had earned its place among the stars. The storm rises. The Valkyrian fleet emerged from Jupiter's shadow, their ships arranged in an attack formation that spoke of absolute confidence. Their previous encounter with Earth's weather manipulation had taught them caution, but not fear. That was about to change. "They're deploying their countermeasures," Yuki reported, studying the sensor data. The alien ships were generating some kind of field that rippled through space, clearly designed to disrupt artificial weather patterns. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Exactly as expected. Begin Phase 1. Across the solar system, thousands of Starsweeper satellites activated simultaneously. But instead of creating the localized storms the Valkyrians had prepared for, they began a subtle, choreographed manipulation of existing weather patterns. Solar winds shifted almost imperceptibly. Magnetic fields twisted in ways that seemed natural. The alien fleet continued its advance, their countermeasures detecting nothing obviously artificial. They passed the orbit of Jupiter's outermost major moon, moving into the perfect position. Phase 2, Sarah ordered. The Jupiter amplification network sprang to life. Hundreds of satellites hidden in the gas giant's intense radiation belts began channeling its enormous magnetic field. The effect was like dropping a boulder into a pond. Natural space weather patterns amplified and redirected, creating a cascade of disturbances that grew exponentially. The Valkyrian commander noticed too late. Their transmission came through filled with static. "What are you doing? Our sensors show only natural phenomena." "That's the point," Sarah muttered, though she didn't transmit the response. The true breakthrough of Project Aurora wasn't just controlling space weather, it was making artificial weather indistinguishable from natural events. The trap closed. Multiple weather fronts converged on the Valkyrian fleet from all directions. Their countermeasures, designed to handle artificial disturbances, couldn't cope with what appeared to be natural solar system processes gone haywire. Ships began losing power as their energy shields overloaded. "Their formation is breaking up," the tactical officer reported. Multiple ships showing critical system failures. But the Valkyrians weren't finished. Their flagship, a massive vessel at the fleet's center, began emitting a powerful energy field that started to stabilize the chaos around them. Sarah had anticipated this too. Execute Phase 3. Full power to the Jupiter network. The gas giant's magnetic field surged, transformed by thousands of satellites working in perfect harmony. A massive storm front formed, larger than anything humanity had ever attempted. It wasn't just weather anymore. They were manipulating the fundamental forces that shaped space itself. The Valkyrian flagship's field collapsed under the onslaught. Ships scattered in every direction, their carefully planned formation dissolving into chaos. Some managed to jump to FTL, while others were caught in the artificial storms, their systems completely overwhelmed. "Incoming transmission," Yuki announced. "The Valkyrian commander is requesting a ceasefire." The alien leader's image appeared on the main screen, their silver scales dulled with stress. "How is this possible? You're controlling the weather of an entire solar system." "No," Sarah replied calmly. "We're working with it. Your mistake was thinking you could ignore the natural forces of space. We learned to understand them, to become part of them." The commander was silent for a long moment. "The Empire has never encountered anything like this. We believe your technology was primitive." "A common mistake," James interjected. Underestimating humanity tends to have unexpected consequences. The remaining Valkyrian ships had gathered around their damaged flagship, no longer showing any signs of aggression. Their commander's next words carried a weight of formal significance. The Empire acknowledges humanity's control of this solar system. We request terms for withdrawal. As James began discussing ceasefire conditions, Sarah stepped back from the control interface. The holographic display showed the aftermath of their victory, the largest space weather manipulation in human history, still swirling through the Jupiter system. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Yuki said softly, joining her. "We're not just defending Earth anymore. We're reshaping the very nature of space travel and warfare." Sarah nodded, watching as the artificial storms began to dissipate, leaving behind new, stable weather patterns that would persist for months. But this is just the beginning. The technology that saved us from conquest could help us explore the galaxy. The Starsweeper satellites continued their silent work, maintaining the complex web of weather patterns that now protected the solar system. Humanity had not only survived its first interstellar war, it had emerged with capabilities that would change the future of space exploration forever. As the Valkyrian fleet prepared for their supervised withdrawal, Sarah was already thinking about the next steps. The ability to control space weather opened up possibilities that even she hadn't imagined when she made her accidental discovery months ago. The age of human expansion among the stars was about to begin, and it would start with mastery over the very forces that shaped the space between them. New dawn. 1 year after the Valkyrian retreat, Sarah Chen stood in the observation dome of Ganymede Station, watching the dance of artificial auroras across Jupiter's atmosphere. The massive gas giant's weather patterns now flowed in carefully maintained channels, creating safe corridors for spacecraft and powerful barriers against unauthorized incursion. "The trade delegation from the Centauri Confederation has arrived," Yuki announced, joining her at the window. "They're very eager to discuss weather control technology sharing." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. News of humanity's victory over the Valkyrian Empire had spread quickly through nearby star systems. Earth had transformed overnight from an isolated backwater to a major power in local space. The ability to control space weather had changed everything. "Show me the latest deep space survey," she requested. The dome's holographic system activated, displaying a map of known space extending several hundred light-years in all directions. Colored lines showed the new trade routes and exploration corridors that humanity had created using chains of Starsweeper satellites. By manipulating space weather patterns across vast distances, they had made faster-than-light travel safer and more efficient than ever before. "The Arcturus network is almost complete," Yuki reported. "Once it's operational, we'll have stable weather patterns extending 40 light-years from Earth in all directions." The scope of what they had achieved still amazed Sarah. What had started as an accidental discovery during a debris-clearing experiment had evolved into technology that was reshaping galactic civilization. The Starsweeper satellites no longer just created storms. They maintained vast networks of controlled space weather that made interstellar travel and commerce possible on an unprecedented scale. James arrived as they were reviewing the latest expansion plans. His military uniform now bore the insignia of the newly formed Interstellar Weather Control Authority. "The Valkyrians are back," he announced without preamble. "But not as conquerors this time. They're requesting permission to establish a permanent diplomatic mission on Mars." Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's quite a change from their initial attitude. "Defeat has a way of adjusting perspectives," James replied dryly. "But there's more. They're offering to share their energy manipulation technology in exchange for weather control training." It was a tempting proposal. Combining Valkyrian energy tech with human weather control could open up even more possibilities. But Sarah had learned to be cautious. What does the Security Council think? They're interested, but wary. The Valkyrians aren't the only ones making offers. Half the local powers want to establish technological exchange programs with Earth. Sarah turned back to the window, watching a cargo ship navigate the weather-controlled shipping lane near Jupiter. Humanity's position had changed dramatically in just 1 year. They were no longer struggling for survival. They were helping to establish new rules for interstellar civilization. "We need to think carefully about how we proceed," she said. "Weather control isn't just a military advantage anymore. It's becoming the foundation of interstellar infrastructure. We have a responsibility to manage it wisely." As if to emphasize her point, a massive solar wind surge appeared at the edge of their sensor range. Before the Starsweeper network, such an event would have disrupted shipping and communications throughout the system. Now, the automated weather control systems smoothly redirected the disturbance into designated buffer zones. "The latest satellite production figures are in," Yuki reported, checking her tablet. "We're up to 500 units per day, with 3 new manufacturing facilities coming online next month." The numbers were impressive, but Sarah was already thinking about the next evolution of the technology. Her team had begun experimenting with ways to use weather control for terraforming, potentially making hostile planets habitable by managing their atmospheric conditions. "Have you seen the proposals from the Mars colonists?" James asked, seeming to read her thoughts. "They want to use weather control to speed up the terraforming process." Sarah nodded. "It's possible. We're already maintaining stable weather patterns in Mars orbit. Extending that control to the atmosphere would be challenging, but not impossible." An alert chimed softly, indicating the arrival of more diplomatic vessels. Earth had become a hub of interstellar activity, with ships from dozens of civilizations arriving daily to trade, negotiate, and learn. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the Valkyrians hadn't forced us to develop this technology so quickly," Yuki mused. "We would have discovered it eventually," Sarah replied. "Human curiosity and innovation can't be stopped. They can only be channeled. The Valkyrians just gave us a reason to channel them in this particular direction." Through the dome's window, Jupiter's managed weather patterns created a spectacular display of light and energy. What had begun as a defensive measure had evolved into something far more significant, a technology that united rather than divided, that made space itself more accessible to all species. "The next generation of satellites will be ready for testing next week," Sarah announced. "They'll be able to create and maintain weather patterns over even greater distances." James smiled. "Always pushing forward. What's the goal this time?" "The same as it's always been," Sarah replied, watching another ship navigate safely through their controlled space weather. "To understand the universe better, and to use that understanding to help humanity reach its full potential." As night fell over Ganymede Station, the Starsweeper satellites continued their endless dance, maintaining the invisible patterns that made interstellar civilization possible. Humanity had not only survived its first contact with advanced alien life, it had helped create a new age of exploration and cooperation. The storms that had once threatened them now served as bridges between the stars, and Sarah Chen's accidental discovery had become the key to humanity's future among them.